This is Dr. John Tolson, and you're listening to the Disciple Making Podcast. We've started a new series called Critical Questions. And we said last week as we opened this series up that this is a matter of life and death, of living or existing, of heaven or hell. So the first question we started with, and we're going to continue it today, is, who is Jesus? And if you go back and watch last time's session, you'll see that, first of all, I went back in the Old Testament part of the Bible, first part of the Bible, and looked at the predictions or the prophecies about the coming Messiah, Jesus. And then I moved to the New Testament and looked at the verses that told you exactly when that prediction came true. And so you might want to go back, and I hope you look those up and study them. It's a great study to arm you and encourage you in your faith, but also to help other people that are trying to figure out life and trying to figure out if this Jesus is real or not. Secondly, we looked at his claims. He said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. The Father and I are the same. We're one. And so we looked at some of those claims. We looked at his character. And we looked at the verses which over and over again say he was perfect. And then the conclusion was that Jesus, whether he's a liar, insane, or he was who he claimed to be. Now, who is Jesus? Let's continue this search. John chapter 20, at the end of the Gospel of John, there are 21 chapters. We're going to go to the end of John chapter 20. We read the following in verse 30 and 31. Jesus' disciples saw him do many miracles besides the ones told about in this book. But these are recorded so that you will believe that he is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that believing in him, you will have life. Remember what I said? This is a matter of life or existence, existing or really living. And so it's saying here that he is trying to convince people by his miracles, but also by his words. So if you read through the Gospel of John, you'll see there are two ways Jesus tried to convince people then and now of who he claimed to be, that he was the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God, God in a body. He did it first of all through his words, the things that he said in conversations or his more formal teaching times. In fact, it's often said in the New Testament that people, after they heard him speak or teach, they said he spoke as one with authority. And then we see he does this same thing through his works or his miracles. For example, you can go to John 2, 1 through 11, he changes water to wine. You can go to John 5, 1 through 9, he heals a crippled man. You can go to John 6, 5 through 14, and he feeds 5,000 plus people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 small fishes from a little boy. You can go to John 6, 16 through 21. He walks on water. You can go to John 9, 1 through 7. He heals a man who had been born blind from birth. And then you can go to John 11, 17 through 44. He raises a man from the dead. The man's name was Lazarus. His impact on people was profound and life-changing. So, for example, if you go to Acts chapter 4, verse 13, we see this. And so Jesus dies on a cross. 3 days later, he's raised from the dead. And then he begins to appear to the disciples and others for over a period of around 40 days. But look at Acts chapter 4, verse 13. It says, when the council, who's the council? We'll go back to verse 5. The next day it happened that the council of all the Jewish leaders was in session. So this is the council of all the Jewish leaders. Back to verse 13. When the council saw the boldness of Peter and John and could see that they were obviously uneducated non-professionals, they were amazed and realized what being with Jesus had done for them. Wow. But here's a question I got to ask myself right now, and maybe ask you. What has your being with Jesus done for you? Is it observable to you? Is it observable to those in your family? Is it observable to people that you work with that may not even know you're a follower of Jesus, but by how you live and how you operate, they know something's different about you? So the 11 disciples, remember Judas betrayed our Lord. So the 11 disciples were convinced of who Jesus was. They were convinced that he lived, died, and rose from the dead. They were now willing not only to live for him, but they were willing to die for him. Listen to this. People will often die for the truth, but they will not die for a lie. They would have been off their rocker, so to speak, to live and die for him, which they did, if he was not telling the truth, if they weren't convinced he was who he claimed to be, if they weren't convinced he lived, died, and rose from the dead, and they saw him after he rose from the dead. So what's the conclusion then? Question: are you convinced that Jesus was God in a body, lived, died, and rose from the dead? Are you convinced of that? Does he live in your life? Have you asked him to come take up residence in you? But thirdly, if he has come into your life, if he lives in you, the question then is, are you aware of what he expects of you after he comes in your life? Are you carrying out his assignments for you? Do you understand that once you come to know Christ, you are no more prepared for heaven than at that moment? So why does he leave us here? He didn't take up space, but it's to carry out his assignments. So there are three kinds of people on the planet. Number one, those who don't believe Jesus was who he claimed to be. Number two, that group of people who believe Jesus was who he claimed to be, but they don't follow him. Number three, people that believe Jesus was who he claimed to be, and they follow him. Which one are you? You think about that. Thanks for listening to the Disciple Making Podcast. Check out our website at thetolsongroup.com and sign up for my weekly encouraging videos called Red Glasses Talks to come to your email every Monday morning. You can also find me at Dr. John Tolson on social media. I'd appreciate it if you'd leave me a review and share with a friend.